I didn't even make it past the elevator before the whispers started. I barely stepped onto the marketing floor, still adjusting the strap on my laptop bag, when I saw him turn. Thomas Whitmore, my so-called boss. Cold eyes, jaw locked, like he'd been waiting all morning for someone to humiliate. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. He took one long look at me, at my dark wash jeans, my navy blouse, my flats, and sneered like I'd walked in wearing a Halloween costume. Seriously, he said loud enough for the entire floor to hear. That's what you show up in? The typing stopped. Heads turned. Phones slowly slipped away from ears. Everyone could smell blood. I didn't flinch. Is there a problem, sir? I asked, keeping my voice even. Not weak. Not apologetic. Just calm. He marched straight toward me, eyes narrowed. A problem? Yeah, there's a problem. This is a professional workplace, not a weekend garage sale. There it was. The insult. The public moment. The beginning of the scene he had clearly rehearsed in his head. I wasn't informed jeans violated the dress code, I replied, still composed. But I could already feel the tension in the room thickening. You weren't informed because I didn't think anyone needed to be told not to look like a customer at a truck stop, he snapped. I glanced sideways, a few people smirking behind their screens. A couple others staring down into their coffees like cowards. He leaned in closer, his voice lower now. Let me make this clear. You're done here. Pack your things. You don't belong. My heart didn't race. Not even a flicker of panic. Because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't some clueless new hire who didn't read the employee handbook. I wasn't here because I needed a job. I was here to test them. All of them. They thought I was just another applicant in a cubicle learning their cliques, staying quiet during meetings, eating lunch alone. They didn't know that 2 months ago, I became the majority stakeholder of the very company Thomas was trying to run like his personal kingdom. They didn't know that the real CEO, the one who had built the company before stepping back to retire, had sold me his shares quietly, privately, under NDA. I had kept my identity hidden for one reason only, to see what kind of culture I was inheriting. And let me tell you, today gave me more answers than I needed. But I didn't say a word in that moment. I just looked him straight in the eyes and smiled. Understood, I said. And I turned around and walked out of that office while they stared after me like I was a nobody. But they were about to find out just how wrong they were. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a private conference room across town, wearing a black tailored suit and heels sharp enough to cut glass. I logged into the executive system from my personal laptop and opened the HR access. Thomas Whitmore's name popped up right away. Listed as Director of Operations. 6 years of service. Dozens of complaints. Buried. Disregarded. Swept under the rug. I flagged every single one for reinvestigation. Then I sent a calendar invite for an emergency 9 a.m. executive meeting the next day. Subject line, new leadership direction, attendance mandatory. I was done playing undercover. Now it was time to introduce myself. And no one in that room would be ready for what I had planned. The next morning, I didn't enter through the side door like before. I didn't ride the regular elevator with the rest of the employees. And I definitely didn't walk onto that floor wearing jeans. I arrived at 8:42 a.m. sharp in a sleek black Escalade that pulled up to the private parking entrance. Security recognized me instantly. They had been briefed just hours earlier. No questions. No ID checks. Just nods and a quick, "Good morning, Ms. Dalton." I stepped out of the car in a charcoal gray power suit, my hair tied up in a tight, clean twist, and heels that echoed with authority. The moment I walked in, every footstep felt intentional. Like thunder. Upstairs, in the executive boardroom, 12 senior managers sat whispering behind coffee cups. They had no idea what was coming. And outside that boardroom, a crowd had gathered. The entire floor had heard the rumors. Whispers of a surprise meeting. Something big. Something unusual. Thomas hadn't shown up yet. Typical. But I had arrived 20 minutes early, not to wait for them, to watch them, to see the looks on their faces when reality slapped them harder than I ever could. At exactly 9 a.m., I opened the doors. The room fell silent. People looked up, confused, some startled, others whispering as they took in my presence like it didn't make sense. Why is she here? Isn't that the girl he fired? Isn't that Wade? Then came Thomas, rushing in 2 minutes late, phone in one hand, latte in the other, arrogant as ever. The moment he saw me at the head of the table, his steps faltered. He blinked like his brain was glitching. You, he said, staring. You're not supposed to be here. I stood up slowly, placed both palms on the table, and looked him dead in the eyes. No, Thomas. You're not supposed to be here. He laughed. Actually laughed. Is this some kind of joke? I didn't answer with words. I turned the laptop around, displaying a screen with the company's ownership breakdown. His smirk fell, and then it dropped completely when his eyes caught the name. Ava Dalton, 51% ownership stake. The air changed. Every whisper outside the glass walls stopped. Every person inside the room, frozen. He swallowed hard. What is this? It's called authority, I said, voice cool and sharp. And you just made the biggest mistake of your career. You're lying. This isn't possible. The board knew last night. I cut in. You didn't. Because I didn't need your approval. You don't have the clearance to even see the shareholder meetings. But I do. Silence. A dead, humiliated silence. I've spent the past 3 weeks working undercover here, I continued, addressing the entire room now. Watching how my employees are treated. Observing who builds others up and who tears them down to feel bigger. I looked around the table. Eyes avoided mine. Faces turned pale. Some of you showed kindness. Some of you looked away. And some of you laughed while your colleague was publicly humiliated over a pair of jeans. My voice cracked just slightly. Enough to make the moment land harder. You didn't know who I was. And that's fine. But what you showed me is who you are. Thomas tried to interrupt. Ava. Ms. Dalton. I corrected coldly. You no longer have the authority to use my first name. In fact. I turned the laptop back toward me and tapped a single key. You're officially terminated. Effective immediately. Security is waiting outside. You can collect your things after this meeting ends. He stood frozen, face red, mouth open like a fish gasping for air. You can't do this, he hissed. I just did. The room stayed silent as he stood there, paralyzed by his own arrogance. Finally, with shaking hands, he turned and walked out, but not before catching the shocked, horrified faces of the very employees who had once laughed along with him. I watched him go without blinking. Then I turned back to the board. Let's talk about rebuilding, I said. Because this company is about to change. After Thomas stumbled out of the boardroom like a disgraced politician, the silence in the room wasn't just awkward. It was electric. No one knew what to say. No one wanted to be the first to breathe too loudly. I stayed standing at the head of the table. I let the silence stretch. Let them stew. Then I said it. Calm. Unshaken. Starting today, I'm auditing every team, every process, every leader, and every ignored complaint. That hit hard. I could practically feel the blood draining from a few faces around the table. I've already reviewed confidential HR reports. I continued, slowly dragging my eyes across each and every one of them. Some of you have been warned before. Others have avoided accountability because you thought no one was watching. And then I pointed directly at Brenda, head of finance. Do you remember Layla from Peril? I asked. Brenda blinked. Froze. Why, yes. She filed 3 reports last year. About emotional bullying. About working unpaid weekends. About being threatened with termination if she refused to stay quiet. She was fired without investigation. By you. Brenda's lip trembled. She didn't have the skills to. Don't, I snapped. Don't finish that sentence. Because she did have the skills. I worked beside her for a week, watching her run circles around your team. I let that land. Then I turned to Henry, head of client relations. You were kind to me, I said. But you laughed when Thomas humiliated me. Why? His shoulders stiffened. I didn't want to seem like I was standing up for someone beneath you, I offered. He shut his mouth. I looked at the rest of them. Some of you are going to get a second chance, I told them. Not because you deserve one, but because this company deserves better leadership, and I believe in growth. Then I paused. But if you can't change, if you're here to keep power by stepping on people, you'll be gone by the end of the week. One of the senior developers, Jillian, who I remembered as someone who had offered me a tissue when I sat quietly in the break room, hesitantly raised her hand. Yes, I asked. She looked nervous but honest. I just want to say, I'm sorry for not saying anything that day. I saw what happened, and it wasn't right. I looked her dead in the eye and nodded. Thank you. Then I turned to the glass wall. Outside, employees were still pretending to work while stealing glances into the boardroom. Open the doors, I said. The assistant hesitated. Now. The doors opened wide, and the team out there saw me, not as the girl who got humiliated, but as the one who held the room captive. I stepped out. Half of them looked ready to shrink into their chairs. But I smiled, not fake, not condescending. Just steady. I want every department lead to bring their full teams into the main floor in 10 minutes, I said loudly. I'll be making some introductions. And some announcements. Someone gasped softly. Another dropped their pen. I could see Elise, the team lead who had once ignored me like I didn't exist, stiffen at her desk. I didn't care, because this wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about fixing a company that had rotted from the inside. 10 minutes later, the floor was packed. Standing room only. You could hear hearts thudding if you listened closely enough. I stood on the central platform, mic in hand. My name is Ava Dalton, I began. Until yesterday, you didn't know who I really was. But I knew who you were. I scanned the room. I worked beside you, ate with you, listened to your conversations. I saw who was kind to the new girl, who was too proud to say hello, and who laughed when someone was publicly torn down. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. I'm the majority owner of this company now. And no, I didn't dress the part when I walked in, because I didn't need to. I let that hang in the air. I was looking for character, not compliance. People were glued to me now. Some of you passed that test. Others didn't. And I'll be honest, I'm not here to punish people who made one mistake. But I am here to dismantle a culture of fear and ego. I could see Layla standing at the back of the room. She had come back for the meeting after I personally called her last night. She was holding her ID badge again, reactivated. I looked toward her as I spoke the next words. If you ever felt like your voice didn't matter here, I want you to know that stops today. A few people clapped. Then more. Then the entire room erupted in applause, hesitant at first, but then it grew. Louder. More genuine. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held them back, because the real work had just begun. I didn't expect him to show up again. But 4 days later, after I'd already fired 2 senior managers, rehired 3 unjustly terminated employees, and restructured half the leadership, Thomas Whitmore walked right through the front doors of my company. Unannounced. Uninvited. Unapologetic. I was in the middle of a one-on-one with Elise, the team lead who had quietly avoided me during that humiliating moment in the hallway. She was mid-apology, nervously twisting the charm bracelet on her wrist, when my assistant knocked and leaned in. Miss Dalton, Thomas Whitmore is downstairs. He asked to see you. I looked up, deadpan. Did he now? Elise's face went pale. He came back? I stood. Excuse me, Elise. We'll continue in 10. I walked toward the elevator, calm, cold, controlled. The floor was quiet. People could feel the tension. Everyone knew he'd been fired. Everyone knew why. But no one knew what kind of man returned to the scene of his downfall without shame. He wasn't just arrogant. He was desperate. I stepped into the executive lounge. There he was, sitting like he still owned the building, legs crossed, elbow over the back of the chair, that same smirk on his face. Miss Dalton, he said like it was still some kind of joke. Looking sharp. I see the throne suits you. I gave you a clear exit, I said flatly. Why are you here? He stood, slow and rehearsed.
To talk.
Man to woman. I didn't flinch. Make it quick. He dropped the fake smile. You made your point.
You humiliated me.
Fair play. But this company, I helped build it. You may own it on paper, but I made it run. My systems. My connections. I leaned against the wall, arms folded. You're bullying. You're silencing. Your fragile ego. You mean those systems? His lips tightened. You're emotional. Wrong move. I'm strategic, I said through clenched teeth. And you're 5 seconds away from being escorted out by security. He paused. Calculating. Look, I came with a proposal. I know things about this company, buried accounts, investors you've never heard of, clients with sensitive retention issues. You fire me, fine. But bring me back. As a consultant, I help you avoid what's coming. What you don't see. I took a step forward. Slowly. You publicly fired me in front of 40 people over jeans. You humiliated me to flex your power. And now you want me to hire you back. I'm offering you protection, he snapped. I don't need protection. I need integrity. And you have none. His mask cracked for the first time. You think you're better than me? I stared him down.
No.
I know I am. That was the end of it. I hit the call button. Security walked in seconds later. I didn't even have to say the words. They guided him out like a rejected bidder at an auction. And I didn't watch him leave. I just turned my back, because he didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the people still here. The ones trying to believe again. That afternoon, I called Layla into my office. The woman Thomas had bullied out of payroll. She walked in hesitant, like she didn't know if she truly belonged yet. You're not just coming back, I told her. You're being promoted. She blinked. What? You're the new head of employee relations. I want someone who understands pain to lead change. Someone who's lived through it. Someone who knows what silence costs. She shook her head. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than half the people who used to sit in this office. Her eyes filled with tears. Layla, I said gently, I'm not building a new company. I'm rebuilding the heart of the old one. And that starts with people who give a damn. She nodded slowly, then broke into tears. That night, I sat in my office alone. Lights off, skyline glittering through the glass. This place that wasn't healed. Not yet. But it had a pulse again. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. The final weeks felt like surgery, without anesthesia. There were days I walked into smiling faces, and days I walked into cold stares. You see, not everyone wants change, especially those who thrived in the shadows. But I didn't care. This wasn't about making friends. It was about fixing something broken. And maybe, just maybe, finding myself in the process. By week 4, I had a new leadership team in place. People I trusted. People who weren't obsessed with titles or corner offices. People who remembered why they started working here in the first place, because they believed in something. Layla was now head of employee relations. Jillian took over Tech Henry, after owning his silence and proving he could do better, stepped into client strategy. And Brenda?
Gone.
I didn't fire her with drama. No yelling. No announcements.
Just a quiet meeting.
Brenda, I said, I read every internal email thread from last year. I saw how you spoke to your junior staff. I saw how you covered for Thomas. I saw the terminations you justified by manipulating performance reports. Her eyes widened.
She tried to talk.
I raised a hand. Let's not pretend. You know what you did. And I gave you 4 weeks to come clean.
You didn't.
Her badge hit the table 30 seconds later. I won't lie, it felt good. But it wasn't revenge. It was justice. One afternoon, I passed the break room and saw something that stopped me in my tracks. It was Elise. She was sitting next to one of the new hires, a nervous girl barely out of college, and she was showing her how to organize a presentation. Patient.
Kind. Human.
I leaned in and said, nice to see. Elise looked up, embarrassed. I didn't stand up for you that day, she said. And I hated myself for it after. I walked in and sat across from her. No titles. No walls. I used to think silence was safer than speaking up, she said. But now I know it's not. It's just a slower kind of damage. I nodded. We can't undo what we were, but we can decide who we become. She smiled. Thanks for not giving up on people like me. That hit deeper than I expected, because truthfully, I almost did give up. Not on her. Not on them. On me. The real test came a few weeks later. We were hosting our quarterly all-hands meeting. For the first time, I was speaking not as a guest, not as an undercover owner, but as myself. Hundreds of employees gathered in the event hall. The tension was different this time. Not fear, hope. Cautious, but real. I stepped up to the mic. The lights dimmed, and I told them the truth. 5 weeks ago, I stood here humiliated in front of many of you. Not because I made a mistake, but because I was judged by someone who mistook power for value. He said I didn't belong here. I paused, eyes locked. But I do belong here. Not because I'm the owner, but because this company is mine to fix, and I refuse to let it become a place where silence wins. You could hear a pin drop. I'm not interested in being a CEO who hides behind press releases and policies. I want to be present. I want to be human. And I want all of you to feel like you're part of something that's worth waking up for. People began to clap. I held up my hand gently. But this only works if you help me build it. That means accountability. That means courage. That means looking around and asking, did I make this space better today? If the answer is no, then tomorrow do better. The claps got louder. I took a breath. I'm Ava Dalton. I got fired here for wearing jeans. And now I wear whatever I want because I know what really matters. The applause was thunderous. Not because I was perfect, but because they believed me, because they finally knew who I was. Later that evening, I stayed behind, walking the empty halls alone. No one laughing behind my back. No one whispering. Just me, in the same building that once tried to break me. I walked past the window where Thomas once humiliated me. I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I'd changed the ending. And that, more than revenge, was everything.